All right.
I didn't tell Joe that as a previous member, if there's one that misses, that he automatically fills in. So
Picked along.
Count me in.
Oh, there he is.
Right. All right. Well, it is 5 o'clock, so I'll get this meeting started. So welcome to the October 7th Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting. This meeting is being conducted entirely remotely. So please take care not to screen share your computer, as anything you screen share may be captured by the recording. Also, please make sure to mute your phone or your computer microphone when you're not speaking, so that you're not picked up by the recording and you're not causing any feedback for anybody else. With that, I will open it up for public comment on items not being heard this evening. Yeah, not looking like we have any public comments, so I will go through tonight's continuances. So under notices of intent, we have Lower Pocomo Nominee Trust at 88 Pocomo Road, continued until October 28th. We have Pocomo Point Realty Trust at 90 Pocomo Road, continued until October 28th. And we have Warren's Landing Nominee Trust at 40 Warren's Landing Road, continued until October 28th. Under amended orders of conditions, Scannell at 119R Eel Point Road is also continued until October 28th. And that looks like all of our continuances this evening. So we will begin tonight under notices of intent with Antuline Properties LLC at 19 East Creek Road. And this is represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. I guess, do we have a full board right now? If I could ask the chair, is everybody on or?
Maureen is on. I am not sure that I've seen Dave LaFleur at this point.
I'm trying to get a hold of Dave real quickly to see if he's going to make it or not. So if everyone can bear with me.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
And we have Linda and Ian's on too, I assume?
Yes, they are on.
So everyone else is here. So the only one is not David. Okay.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon. And I'm fine with moving on. I just wanted to know who I had before us here right now. So, so Jeff, if you don't hear from Dave, that is okay.
Well, I haven't heard back from him yet. He hasn't missed any, so he'd be able to read in if necessary, Paul.
Well, hopefully bring a closure to this one tonight. But thank you. Again, for the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the property owner and applicant. This is a notice of intent before you for 19 East Creek Road. We've been before you a few times now. So I'd just like to briefly walk through again where the proposal is at now, discuss a few of the issues that we discussed last time and have addressed, and hopefully bring some closure to this. Many of you are familiar with the property. It is located at the end of East Creek Road, behind our island home, and essentially fronting on the creeks. The plan that you have before you is a plan that is revised up to this meeting. It's been revised, I believe, 2 times now based on the original submittal, and it's for the modifications to this existing single-family dwelling that's sitting on this property. And just working through the proposal right to left or east to west. Again, there is a set of stairs that come off of an existing wraparound deck at the front or the creek side of the property that we'll be removing that access stair off of the easterly side. That is a removal of 24 square feet of structure. Along the southerly portion of the existing structure, we were adding a proposal to add 2 feet or 24 inches to the backside of the structure. That's approximately 30 square feet. That is a 24-inch extension. We did talk about this at the last meeting. This existing structure is elevated on a wooden pile system. It is flood zone compliant. And what we would be doing is simply bracketing that extension onto the existing piles. So there would be no additional piles added, and there would be no foundation walls added in that particular area. On the original proposal, we had a mechanical space of approximately 35 square feet in that same area. That has been omitted from the application. As we move to the west side of the structure, remember the intent was to eliminate the existing garage on the property and infill that with an interior space. We would then be removing approximately 9 square feet of deck along that westerly building wall, and eliminating the garage door, and eliminating approximately 19 square feet of a concrete apron that exists. Original proposal had a pergola proposed off of the westerly end of the structure. We have omitted that pergola from the request. We still have left in the patio area that we were proposing along the westerly edge. If you recall, we were omitting approximately 1,200 square feet of shell driveway, and we're incorporating in there a native planting area, removing a portion of the shell driveway, and creating that bluestone patio along that westerly side. The other proposal was then to remove the area of Belgian block apron, which is a driveway turnout along the southerly property line, and then also to revegetate an area to the south of an existing timber retaining wall. That total would be approximately 975 square feet of native plantings. Plantings proposed would be groundsel, salt marsh elder, seaside goldenrod, and bayberry. That is a slight revision based on comments from Seth with regard to native plants for this particular regime adjacent to the salt marsh. The other component of the application was we were removing an existing timber wall and replacing it with a Penn fieldstone wall. That was an in-kind replacement.
Jeff, we're seeing your screen.
And then we were also, we had talked previously too about renovations to the existing, internal renovations to the existing structure, in which one of the major factors was the reduction of the amount of existing glass along the creek side of the property. And we had also spoken about that. So since the last application, clarification on the fact that we could cantilever and bracket off the small 24-inch addition to the southerly building face. We omitted the pergola. We fine-tuned, we hope, the planting list that was provided. And I also did provide to Jeff a construction protocol with regard to the work that would be entailed to complete this project. To go through that, no heavy machinery will be used. Construction materials, shingles, lumber, stone, etc., would be stored in the driveway or inside the garage. A covered dumpster would be located in the driveway and emptied on a weekly basis. Netting would be installed around the perimeter of the house to catch any fallen debris. Site cleanup of debris would be conducted at the end of each workday. And a silt fence would be installed along the driveway edge depicted on the site plan that we had previously submitted. So that is the proposal, and happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Paul. It looks like Mark has a question or comment.
Yeah, Paul, thank you for being so responsive in several areas. Appreciate that. Tell me again where the cantilever part will be in the project.
Okay, it's on the back side of the building. It's the farthest easterly corner of that back building.
The
So
30 square foot thing?
correct. That's right. So that's
Okay.
basically that building wall gets bumped out by 2 feet.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I know, Paul, I'm appreciative that that pergola was removed, so thank you and your clients. So if there's no questions or comments from commissioners, I'll open it up for public comment. Looks like we do not have anything on YouTube at this point. Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close this one?
Yeah, we have all of the required information.
Paul, I'm assuming you'd like to close?
Yes, I would love to close.
Okay.
I'll make that motion, Madam Chairman.
I think Ian maybe got you with his hand. Ian, were you making that motion? Oh, you're muted.
I was indeed, Madam Chair. Thank you.
A second.
Okay, perfect. So Ian gets the motion, Linda gets the second. By roll call, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everyone. Actually, Ian and Ashley have seen this one for a number of years. So in the last few weeks, we've dealt with 74 Westchester Street and 19 East Creek Road, and I'm very happy to have them off of my table. So thank you very much.
Take care, Paul.
Here too, yeah, thank you, Paul. All right, that moves us on to Gilbert at 16 D Street. And this is represented by Don Bracken, but I see Ryan Maxwell. Ryan, are you taking this one?
Yep, you got me tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so for the record, Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering. This project was in front of you guys at the last meeting, and some concerns were raised about the location of the AC units and just looking at the plan and the deck in the rear of the house. So we've removed or relocated the AC units outside the 50-foot buffer and placed them behind the cottage that's at the front of the property. Regarding the deck, the architect actually just sent over some revised plans, which are slightly different than what's shown on this plan. So I'll just try to explain those. So in the revised design, the second floor deck that was proposed has been removed. And the edge of the deck was brought in an additional ½ a foot. So there's an overall reduction in deck area of 5 square feet from what's existing now. We're also proposing to use helical piles to support the deck. So that'll reduce any excavation that's needed during construction. I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So related to the refined scope of the deck, I think last time we had brought up wanting the deck, if possible, to be brought outside of the 25-foot buffer. Is that change going to do that? And also, we had talked about not having the piles intrude into the 25-foot buffer, but be beyond and support the deck from beyond that line.
So no, under the revised scope, the deck would more or less remain where the existing deck is. I think the thought was using the helical piles. That's gonna reduce impacts limit excavation, things like that.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Seth, for your question. I know that was a little bit of a sticking point. Jeff?
I was just gonna say, if it's helpful, sorry, I missed it in pulling the plans in my file. I can throw the plan that Ryan is talking about, I believe, onto the screen if people would find that helpful.
Yeah, I think that would probably be good.
And hopefully Ryan will confirm that it's the correct one.
Yep, that's the correct plan.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So yeah, in looking at this plan, it would be hard to place the supports for the deck outside of the 20-foot, 5-foot without drastically reducing the size of the deck.
Yeah, I think, Seth, did you maybe have a follow-up to your question with the plan up?
Yeah, so most of the area looks like it'd probably be fine. The easterly side, just the northwest side, maybe here. Oh, do you have an estimate of like how many piles are needed for that small section there?
The section that's the northwest corner, kind of, that would probably be like 2 piles over there.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Ian?
thank you, Madam Chair. I happen to agree with Seth, and I feel it's no longer a deck. So it's slightly disingenuous to describe it as a deck at this point. And I feel that our 25-foot line is pretty much, sacrosanct. So, I'm disappointed that they didn't come back with a plan that took our concerns into consideration.
Thank you, Ian. And I don't know, is everybody good with this plan? Awesome.
So I think if I'm gauging the board correctly here, that if it's going to be a no, that I'm sure they would reduce as best they can the deck inside the, I guess, remove the deck inside the 25-foot buffer. We would have to come back, obviously, with something, but
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I know it was kind of a hot item of discussion at our last meeting, and it doesn't look like there was much of a reduction between the 2 meetings. So you're getting stuck here a little bit, I think. It looks like Mark has a question for you, and then I think I saw Seth's hand back up.
yep.
Well, I just had a comment, excuse me, a comment for Ryan. I think you're reading some of the commissioners correctly about the 25-foot zone is considered fairly sacred, and adding a roof does change the whole concept of that property. So I think you're reading us right that you might end up with a no vote.
Thank you, Mark. Seth, I'll go back to you.
Thank you. Just on the same vein, it's within our interest to limit any new impacts within the no disturb area. So I know there's currently existing deck there, but having to remove that and then place new piles, obviously helical piles are much better than driving a pile, but it's still new impact within the no disturb area that we would try to avoid if we can. So the clients are able to change the plan, I'd like to see it.
Thank you, Seth. Maureen?
Yeah, I was confused about something. I thought you said, Ryan, through you, Madam Chair. I thought you said that did you say at the beginning that there is no longer going to be a second floor, or was there something removed? Because I don't see it on the plan, but was there something that was no longer getting planned on the second floor?
Yeah, so the second floor the space above the deck was gonna be another deck. But that's just been changed to just the normal roof at this point. So there's still a covering. There was going to be a covering either way, but before it was going to be another deck.
Okay.
Now it's just a true porch.
Okay, so there's the roof is still there, which is a concern for us, but but the other part was removed. Okay, thank you.
And if it helps, that covering is only over a portion of the deck. You can see a little dashed line on the plan that indicates the limit of it. It doesn't seem like it's going to help, but just for clarity's sake.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hmm.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? So we'll open it up for public comment. Looks like we don't have any public comment on YouTube. So Ryan, would you like to continue this until the October 28th meeting?
Yeah, it seems like we'll need to do that.
Okay. Well, then this will continue until the October 28th meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that moves us on to RJG Nominee Trust at 13 Crow's Nest Way, represented by Brian Madden.
Good evening, Brian Madden for the record. This was a proposed septic upgrade. At the last meeting, we continued to receive the natural heritage letter, which we now have, confirming the no adverse impact and no take. I'll turn it over to questions if there are any.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Give a quick check and see if we have any comments from the public on this one. Which also looks like no at this point. So Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, you do.
Okay, Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
All right, is there a motion to close?
So moved.
All right, motion made by Linda. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to the land bank, rear Bacchus Lane, represented by Rachel Freeman.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I am representing the Nantucket Land Bank tonight. We have a property that is defined as the rear of Bacchus Lane, but it's technically behind First Way. And there is a rather large amount of knotweed over the expanse of the whole property. But the small section that I'm in front of you tonight for is an area adjacent to a homeowner's property, and he has been hand treating the knotweed on his own for the past few years. He became rather daunted by the amount of returned vegetation, and so called us this year. We did not realize this was going on because obviously it's behind his house. When we went back there, it is a rather nice wetland, and there are edges of knotweed, which are actually incredibly low at this point. And even though they were allowed to regrow, I'm not sure if it was the drought or what, they did not get much above, a couple inches. And it's very interspersed into other types of vegetation. It's a highly disturbed wetland buffer that then grades into, like I said, a rather nice wetland. We are proposing to do basically an experiment in this area where we would put 2 pigs into a pasture that is surrounded by a low electric fence and see what happened over the course of a week. It's a very small area to treat. And then we would also at the same time be hoping to remove a large soil pile, which is covered in invasives adjacent to the area where we are proposing to put the pigs. In my research, I've seen quite a bit about goats having the capacity to effectively remove knotweed. I haven't been able to find anything that definitively says pigs are able to do the same thing, but I did use pigs to remove Oriental bittersweet, and that was highly successful. This is very much an experiment, and I'm curious over the course of a week or 2 weeks what 2 pigs are able to do here. There's a fair amount of soil disturbance from pigs, but that actually to me is probably beneficial in that they might actually be able to remove the knotweed in that regard. They might root down and actually get not entirely the root entirely out, but quite a bit of it out, which is how I think they were effective with the Oriental bittersweet. I do recognize that being that this is, on the edge of a wetland and in a wetland buffer, there is concern about soil disturbance, but I believe at this point my concern with continuous herbicide applications to treat invasive species would outweigh the potential risks of soil disturbance and hopefully native recolonization by putting pigs in this area. I would eagerly answer any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. I see Maureen's hand, and then Ian, I'll go to you.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Rachel, I was really surprised to see this. It's to have this kind of, I'm glad to see someone trying something that is maybe a bit off the wall, but the natural use of these animals. And I did a little research myself on, and it was fascinating to see how this gets used in farming situations, obviously on a much larger scale, but that the pigs, if you make sure they don't stay in one area too long, and the various things that people have found to be problems, it seems to me your project is worrying about all of them. I mean, that the amount of time that you're letting them stay is so short that I would believe that you'd be able to see whether this is working or not, or is by any chance somehow detrimental. So I am, if some of my colleagues may have, would have more definitive knowledge than I perhaps, but overall, I think this is a really interesting plan and a much better way to control knotweed than herbicides. So I appreciate the creativity you brought to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Ian, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've also, like Maureen, become something of an internet expert on pigs, and I'm fascinated by it. And I'm curious whether or not you're using Herefords or Tamworths, that apparently are the 2 breeds that are noted for their rooting capabilities.
So I am restricted. Part of this project is due to the fact that I'm restricted to the goats that I'm sorry, not the goats, the pigs that I have access to. So we are using a heritage breed of pig, which Sam has been purchasing from upstate New York for a number of years now. And he has, I think, 5 or 6 of them at this moment. And so I actually have access to 2 of them. If I had goats, I would perhaps use goats instead. But I'm curious with pigs because that is the I don't know, the animal that I actually have access to. And that's why I have done work with Oriental Bittersweet with this animal as well. So.
Right, but I wasn't advocating goats. Apparently Tamworths, because of their long snout,
Right.
notorious for, if you really want them to come in, a pig to come in and do the job, they're the ones. Is the heritage, that is the name of the actual breed of the pig?
I am going to have to look to find out exactly what the breed of the pig is. It very well might be a Tamworth, but I will have to ask to figure out exactly what the breed is.
Well, I'm just curious, Rachel.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect my decision.
No. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know off the top of.
But I hope it's successful and that they make good eating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So it looks like Seth has a question or comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it's a creative use of resources and a good collaborative project. Overall, it's a short time span, so hopefully the experiment is successful. The one question I do have is, Japanese knotweed is known to spread through fragmentation. So something like bittersweet is like kind of easy for animals to deal with. But is there a way to like clean and sanitize the pigs before they leave the back of site and get brought back to the farm so that they're not incidentally spreading fragmented knotweed back to the farm?
That is an interesting question. We could certainly clean their feet. I think probably, like a full cleaning and sanitization might be challenging, but I definitely think we could hose them off.
Yeah, I'll let you and Sam take care of that, obviously,
Right.
But if there's a way to just check their hooves and make sure there's not material in there, or their snout might have something, so just hose them down and clean their hooves or something before you leave the site.
Yeah, I don't think he wants Japanese knotweed on the farm either, so.
Right, of course.
Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rachel, on your application, I don't see a wetland delineation lines anywhere.
There should be one in there. If there is not, then that
The very last page says wetland delineation, and it's blank.
interesting. I will have to read.
Anybody else sharing that
No,
issue?
it's blank.
I will resend that because we definitely did it.
I don't doubt you for a minute, but I just wanted to know, how near you are to the actual wetland versus 25 versus 50 feet.
We are right actually in the edge of the wetland and in the 25-foot buffer. So we're right there. We are not way back in the 100-foot buffer. It definitely extends on.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for your questions so far. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Jeff?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we definitely received that from Rachel. It must just not have loaded into the packet correctly for that error. So thanks for catching that, Mark, and we'll get that fixed. But we did go out on that site and verify where they had flagged that wetland.
Thank
Follow
you.
up, actually, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I don't want to hold you up, Rachel. That was not my intent. I just want to know what our policy is regarding setting critters loose in a 25, within the 25-foot zone or in the wetland itself. I didn't know if we had a policy pro or con on that issue, or with a permit only, or what we do with that.
Yeah, I think that's up for discussion tonight in a lot of ways, and we'd probably have a condition to restore, soil and vegetation. But Jeff, do you want to expand upon that?
Sure. So if this is helpful to everybody, this is only the second project we've ever seen where people have been proposing, livestock within the buffer zone. The first one, I don't think anyone was on the commission at that point. Ian may have been. We did one for the land bank parcel out by the Holly Farm at Pulpus Harbor, where they did some grazing of chickens and sheep or goats. I think it was sheep. Sheep. Yeah, it was one that Nicole DuPont had come in, and Caleb Crespin was a part of that, and they came in and they paddocked off some sheep and some chickens in kind of a rotational basis and got a permit. So the only thing that's required, because it's not a true agricultural use that would have some of the exemptions, is that it's just simply a simple permit required. So coming in for a notice of intent is exactly what the land bank should be doing, and you guys can condition it and treat it for the impacts that you feel necessary, but we don't necessarily have a specific policy related to the use of livestock animals within the buffer zone, because we just don't see it that regular.
Thank you, Jeff. And didn't we have an application where Nantucket Marine was trying to clear out maybe Phragmites with goats?
They had talked about it at one point, but I think that they actually abandoned that because they were concerned where they wanted to do it in the marsh. Goats and wet soil are not good friends. It's not good for their hooves. It makes them very soft and gummy, and they're prone to hoof issues. So they kind of kicked the tires on it and then decided that it probably wasn't the best for the goats.
All right, I vaguely remembered that one. Seth?
And just to confirm for Mark's sake, this project will require a waiver.
Should. Jeff?
So this is an interesting question, right? And I think this is kind of the heart of it is our local regulations grant waivers for invasive species work within it. Let me see if I can bring it up really quickly. In section 5 of the regulations, and of course, when I'm looking for it, I can't find it, but let me pull it up. So I think there's a little bit of a question on whether it would or wouldn't, but sorry, my computer's decided to not participate very, very quickly here. So if someone has a other question, let me get it really quickly, and then I'll be right back on it.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Well, not really, except if I may, but it's almost Sam could claim they're pets, and then
Let the pets loose.
yes.
Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let Jeff find the bit about invasive species removal, but I would feel comfortable or more comfortable in this situation applying a waiver as well, just because, fencing's being installed, that soil pile is being removed. It's a little bit more expansive than, it's all invasive species related, but I think it covers our bases just to also have a waiver there probably for long-term net benefit, just so that we're not creating unintended impacts down the road.
Thank you, Seth. I would tend to agree with you for a waiver on this one. While Jeff's looking, I'll see or open it up for public comment. It looks like we do have some public comment from Bobby King. So he asks, how is the parcel going to be accessed for the proposed scope of work? He says, as an abutter, he thanks us for recognizing the importance of protecting the fragile ecosystem and unlooked wetland. And he would like clarification if the scope of work will occur within the wetland setback.
Would you like me to answer that?
Sure, Rachel.
Okay. I believe the answer is yes, it will occur within the wetland buffer. I spoke with Mr. Backus, and he suggested that he was entirely on board with us accessing the property through his sister's house, and I've been in touch with her as well. We anticipate, well, I mean, I guess the thing that I'll say is that this is a very, very, very small area of this wetland buffer and right on the edge of the wetland. So we do not anticipate having them extensively roaming in here. The goal is to have them graze a really finite area for a very short period of time and see what comes of it. If it's where it seems to be working really well, you know, like I said, we'd be interested to move them sort of to the same, within the same area, you know, make of another small area out of this fencing and then graze them there for a week and then we'll be done. If not, we will leave them in the same spot for 2 weeks, but we just want to see you know, keep it very, very small and finite in order to just see if there's a positive impact.
Thank you, Rachel. Jeff?
Sorry, so I did partially remember correctly. Doesn't come up very often. So in section 5 of the regulations, we grant waivers specifically for invasive species work within the buffer zone to waive the requirement to maintain the 25-foot undisturbed buffer zone. But work within the wetland itself still requires that full order of conditions. The waiver that goes with that is that folks could file with an RDA for that work inside the 0 to 25. But I think in this case where we overlap the wetland, I think that waiver wouldn't necessarily apply, and granting it would probably be the safest way to do it. I just didn't want to create something that was contradictory to what we've already adopted. So I think we're good for a waiver.
Thank you, Jeff, for checking on that. Looks like we don't have any more public comment. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close this one?
Yes, you do.
Rachel, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Also move.
All right, so motion made by Mark. Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erickson, aye, Golding. Oh, you're muted, Ian.
Damn it. Sorry. Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you very much.
And that moves us on to Lloyd Realty LLC at 7 Heather Lane, represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the property owner and applicant, Lloyd Realty LLC. Also, I have Rhoda Weinman is on the call with me here. She's having some problems, so she's connected through my my phone right now. But Rhoda is also on this with me. This is a notice of intent for the proposed construction of a single-family home and patio with associated grading, landscaping, and utility installation within the buffer zone to a coastal bank. The property is property address is 7 Heather Lane. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Heather Lane or where it's located, Heather Lane is a street that is off of Hinckley Lane, which is ultimately off of Cliff Road. And this connects with Kimball Avenue, although there is no physical connection. If you go down to the end of Kimball Avenue, you cannot drive from Kimball Avenue to Heather Lane. You could park and walk, but this property is essentially on the west side of the last home on Kimball Avenue, and it's on the far east end of what is known as Heather Lane. It's a undeveloped parcel of property, approximately 1.23 acres in size. It's a long, narrow lot that's approximately only about 100 feet in width, and it goes from Heather Lane to Nantucket Sound. The property itself has had permits issued in the past, long before the present commission has seen any activity on this. And in fact, I don't think anybody on the commission now was involved in any of these prior permits, but I'd like to run you through a few of what those are. In May of 1999, an order of conditions was issued for the construction of, or the installation of a set of beach stairs. Those beach stairs are on the site and they still exist today. In December of 2004, an order of conditions was issued again for the beach stairs and the replanting of bank vegetation. In October of 2006, an order of conditions was issued for a single family residence. And that proposal that you see before you today is essentially what was previously permitted back in 2006. That order was amended in August of 2007, in which time the structure was moved a little bit further away from the top of the coastal bank. And that amended order was issued in August of 2007. Again, that work was not completed. And what you see before you on this present application is essentially what that application was approved back in 2007. There was an existing home on this property located closer to Heather Lane. So there was a residence on this property at one point. And that at that point, that's when the stairs were permitted. The existing dwelling was ultimately removed from the property. So property as it exists today is essentially vacant, with the exception of you do have the existing beach stairs that are there. The permits back in 2006 and 2007 were done for the Malesko family. They ultimately sold to the current owner and applicant. And the proposal that I have before you tonight is actually a proposal for a potential buyer of the property. It would not be the current owner that would be developing this property as you see it before you tonight. The area itself is, Jeff, do you have the overall aerial that I sent of the area? I think that might be a little bit helpful to start with. If not, we can go back to the.
Yeah, it's like he's pulling.
There we
it.
go. Okay. All right. So as you can see, the lot is vacant. It's approximately 100 feet in width. Property to the west is fully developed and accessed off of Kimball Avenue. Property to the east is fully developed and it's actually accessed off of Heather Lane. Both of the structures to the east and the west are essentially built on the high points of the lot facing Nantucket Sound, and essentially are right up or against the 50-foot no build. You can see there is a path there from the property that goes to the existing beach stairs and then down to Nantucket Sound. Property is varies in grade, actually approximately elevation 50 at Heather Lane. There is a low point that drops down approximately 10 feet or so, and then it picks back up at the top of the coastal bank. So you're at a high point, it's low, and then you come up to the backside of where we're proposing to put the dwelling. The resource area that we're talking about here is the coastal bank. This coastal bank area is a fairly stable, it is a stable coastal bank, vegetated. It goes down to coastal beach, and then it goes down to the sound itself. The area that we're proposing the work is outside any mapped NHESP areas. So the proposal you see before you is a notice of intent for work within the 100-foot buffer zone. The structure itself is set back outside of the 50-foot wetland setback, and we are proposing a patio area between the 25 and the 50. Jeff, we can go back to the actual site plan that you have before you. So this is the proposal. Actually, what you see in red is a modification of what was originally submitted. This is a modification of the proposed patio area along the northerly side of the proposed dwelling. The dwelling is set back, as I said, outside of the 50-foot setback. And in fact, a portion of the house is within the 100, but as you move forward, the existing driveway and so forth is actually outside Concom jurisdiction and outside the 100-foot buffer. The proposal you see is the patio area you see is reduced in size from what we had submitted originally. We had been contacted by the owner to the west, which is the Wolf property, and they had expressed concern with the patio area in an attempt to address some of the concerns that they had. We modified that patio area and lessened the size of it, and that's what you see before you. I believe Arthur Reed will be on this call representing the abutter, and I believe he's going to have some comments with regard to the application. But that area in red that you see was essentially a reduction in that area based on some initial conversations we had with Mr. Wolf. The application before you does not require any waivers. It is a typical layout that you typically see on this area, Kimball Avenue, Cliff Road area, in which dwelling is constructed on the high point of the lot, adjacent to the coastal bank, with the attendant parking, septic, everything else would be outside of Concom jurisdiction. Again, if you were to go back and look at the August of 2007 proposal, this is essentially what the prior board did approve, but the patio at that point was different than what we are proposing today. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Yes, Madam Chair. So I must say that the patio, even in its reduced form, looks absolutely massive. And, I don't know when we're going to get our regulations altered, because we've been talking time and again. Jeff, this is no criticism, I can assure you. I know how busy you are, but we see this happening, these patios getting absolutely up to the 25, larger and larger, and it alarms me. So I'll defer to our learned friend Arthur Reed to put it in legal perspective, but it bothers me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that there are 3 stairways all sort of in a row on that property. And there's obviously, I certainly assume, permitted work both to the east and west on the bank. I think I'd feel better to do a site visit and give that a look. And sorry I didn't do it on this, but I didn't anticipate this and then some neighbors' input. So let's hear from them. But I think I'd like to have a site visit for me anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
If I could, Mark. Oh, sorry, Ashley.
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, Mark, the stairs to the left, I think that's actually, it might be currently controlled by one owner, but there's actually 2 lots there. So I think the 2 stairs you see to the east are actually on 2 separate pieces of property. Whereas the front house on Kimball has an access way to one set of stairs, and the bigger developed one with the pool and so forth, I think accesses the other ones. You then have the stairway for this lot that's been there, for some time. And then you have the stairway on the property to the east, which is the Wolf property.
Thank you, Paul. And I was just going to say, I'm fairly familiar with this parcel because I landscaped, I guess, some of the property that the Mlezcos sold off earlier, which has 2 pretty large homes on it. So It's definitely surrounded by homes that each have their individual accesses. So Paul is correct there. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? And if not, oh, Maureen?
Yes, thank you, Ashley. I guess I share Ian's comments and concerns about the extent of this giant patio. And one of the things that concerns me so much is that, it's that patio coming right up to the 25, and that patio is going to be there 365 days a year. And with a great deal, I can't see with the square footage of it, but it's a large patio. And given the extent of the construction, if you will, of that patio in that buffer area, I wish there was a way I would hope that perhaps the proposed new owners could see their way clear to moving that farther away from the 25. I can't tell how deep it is if you go from the house to the end of it by the 25. I'm not sure how deep it is, but perhaps it doesn't have to be as deep. This is suggestions, obviously, but it's distressing to see this much that close to the 25. Thanks.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth, and then I'll go to Ian.
With respect to my fellow commissioners, I certainly agree with Ian that we do need to do the regulatory update regarding patios. But I think it's important to think about what the resource area is here. We're talking about a coastal bank that's well vegetated, stable. This isn't a bordering vegetated wetland where there's groundwater impacts, overland flow impacts. This, in my opinion, is a relatively stable ecosystem. So I personally, in this case, don't see a concern with having patio there. I think in many cases, I've been very vocally opposed to patio because of the groundwater impact, but I don't see that being the case here. You're talking about elevation of between 40 and 50 on a high, well-maintained vegetated bank. Aesthetically, I'm sure the neighbors have concerns, but from our resource area impacts, I don't see it being an issue here as compared to other places I've been opposed to in the past.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
Well, I certainly take Seth's point. Although we don't actually know what the patio is going to be composed of, and whether there's could be substantial runoff in storms going out towards the bank, because I think it's pretty much on the high point. But in answer to Maureen's sort of question as to where it is in relationship to the law, unless I'm reading the plan wrong, the benchmark to the west, where the patio begins, right by the steps on the west, is, according to the smaller drawing, it's 327 feet away from the entrance. It's over. So the lot from there is over 100 yards long, which would certainly allow them to move it back 25. Would allow them to move it back without making much difference, I would have thought. But you're right, Seth. It's not adjacent to a vegetated wetland, so it is a different level of concern. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any more questions or comments, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ian. I did look at the plan again to see the elevation of the deck, and it is going to be at a high point. I think if we have concerns about runoff, we could ask for subsurface infiltration drain to be added in the patio at the north of that site so that it's being directed into the ground. I think that's probably a good idea. But other than that, I don't really see the impact here.
Thank you, Seth.
Ashley, if I could, just to answer, give a few specifics regarding that patio area before you, I think, move on to anybody in the public.
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, thank you. So to Maureen's question, the closest point right now to the patio to the 25-foot buffer on the easterly side is approximately 7 feet. It gets further away on the west, which is approximately would be about 14 feet off of the 25-foot buffer. So from 14 feet to 7 feet, it projects approximately 20 feet out from the back of the proposed deck, and the width is approximately 55 feet, I believe, from east to west. Typically, what we would do in this case, it would be typically whether it's a bluestone patio with open joints, but we could typically, in this area, this is an area with sandy soils where we would typically have some type of subdrain system within that particular area. Mark's point about the sidewalk, I think, would be helpful. And Ian, that gets to the point when you were talking about moving the dwelling to the south. The area where the patio is proposed is essentially at grade. So the grade in that particular area is approximately around elevation 50. That would be maintained. That grade wouldn't be filled. It would be basically maintained, and that's where the patio would be built. The grade then drops dramatically towards Heather Lane. So when you go to the site, you'll see you're walking at a high point, you're going down to a low point, and then you're climbing back up to the plateau of the lot. And the intent would be to build on that backside along the high point, and then there would be fill placed in the front area, kind of where the structure would be built. So the further you move forward here, the further or more fill would be required to achieve what they would be trying to do. But yeah, I was actually hoping for a site walk this past Monday, and unfortunately the rain didn't cooperate.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so at this point, I'll open it up to the public. Arthur, I know I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As indicated, I represent David Wolf, who is the owner of the property immediately to the east. And just to clarify, I think Paul inadvertently at one point referred to that as being the property to the west. And that is the property to the east and is accessed by Kimball Avenue. It's the property to the west that is served by Heather Lane. And just as a point of clarification, Heather Lane and Kimball Avenue actually abut each other, but they come from a completely different title history, and the lots on Kimball Avenue have no rights in Heather Lane, and the lots on Heather Lane don't have any access through Kimball Avenue. Again, not relevant except from the standpoint of just understanding how the property lies and works out. We're concerned, as indicated by Paul, with the patio. The house, as drawn, is outside the 50-foot line from the top of the bank. Obviously, does not require a waiver. We have no issue with that. Our issue is entirely with the patio. My client, whose property is to the east, does not have a patio or deck in front of his house. The house is, and everything to do with it was built outside the 50-foot line, and he feels that the 50-foot buffer from the top of the bank should remain undisturbed. And yes, there can be perhaps more impact if, as Seth indicated, if we're dealing with a patio that would be installed adjacent to a BVW or something like that. But the fact is that you still do have the regulation prohibiting non-water dependent structures within 50 feet of the wetland boundary, in this case, the top of the bank, the top of the coastal bank. And I believe that contrary to what may be the assumption, you definitely do have the ability to enforce a prohibition against patios, a patio being an impervious surface. And the definition of structure, and of course, structures being prohibited within the 50-foot part of the buffer zone. This definition of structures, it says after the initial description is a combination of materials assembled at a fixed location to give support or shelter. Then says the term structure may also be applied to appurtenances that are constructed of impervious surfaces, such as, but not limited to, swimming pools, recreational playing courts, roads, parking areas, parking lots, driveways, etc. I see very little difference between a patio and a recreational playing court or a parking area or a parking lot or a driveway within the area where structures are prohibited. So I think that you definitely can and should apply that definition. Perhaps there's a lot to be said for tightening up the regulations, and that applies to just about any set of regulations that mankind has ever devised. But in this particular case, I think that with the existing regulations, you have the ability to, and again, I would strongly urge you to consider the patio in question to be a structure not non-water dependent, and therefore deny the application and require, first of all, that there be a waiver request, which has not been submitted, and that you then not grant the waiver if such is requested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. Do we have any other public comment at this point? RJ?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? So RJ Turcotte from the Nantucket Land Council. Pardon me if I missed this in the conversation earlier, but does the commission think that this, or consider this an eroding bank? Looking at the 1998 imagery on the town's GIS page, it hasn't moved much, but the property to the east, including Mr. Reed's client, has eroded a good ways. And I don't know if that erosion rate information is available, but just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. We have not discussed this as an eroding bank at this point, but I would say it's eroding just because neighboring property owners have done different like zigzag fences and stabilization projects. So, you know, clearly there's some erosion happening. So then we would probably want to apply the extra footage for an eroding bank based on the erosion rate there. Maureen, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Ashley. The thinking about how else we can look at this, and I do think of a site viewing would be very helpful because Mr. Reed mentioned that the neighbor, they have no patio area. And so I would be, in terms of looking, since we do worry about view sheds and, you know, how does a new structure impact all of that? I would be interested to see, you know, the relative places of the house, the Wolf's house. That's the people who live next door. Is that right? Yes. And
Yes.
you know, vis-a-vis this proposed patio area, and you know, is there in terms of what this will do to the view shed? I mean, I think it'd be very helpful for us to go look at that and see how we feel about that. And then the fact that if this is in fact an eroding bank. I mean, I think, again, site visit would be very useful in terms of looking to see what is currently happening with that. And I know Seth mentioned looking at the GIS, excuse me, looking at the GIS comparisons, looks like it may not be, given what's happened since 1999. But again, I think there's enough here that I think would be very good for us to see it. And I would be especially concerned about the view shed. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. I have to say, I'm in Seth's camp with this patio a little bit. I, agree with Ian. We need to do the regulatory update. I do not love that we permit patios between the 25 and 50, but we do. And I don't feel that it's appropriate to kind of pick this patio out, without more information. So Paul, I think it would be good to submit the patio design information, what that surface is going to be, how it's going to be laid down. So that would help us with our decision. But I do worry about calling this one out differently than other, patios that we've permitted. But I am interested in knowing the erosion rate on this site, because the patio should certainly be, adding that yearly erosion to the 25 foot. So it needs to be potentially pushed back in that case. Any other comments, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to Arthur Reed's point, I think in this case, looking at the definition of what we define as structure, I'm not a lawyer, so I read it differently than you may, but I think it's hard pressed to try to indicate that's a structure based on it's being made out of impervious materials. I guess we'll have to see what Paul and his client comes back with in terms of the patio design. But if you have like a bluestone patio, the stone itself might be impervious, but there's space in between them to create permeability. So as a assemblage of materials, that's now a pervious structure or a pervious installation. So I think we really need to update that definition for it to not be confusing. But with respect to Mr. Reed, I don't see that as being an impervious installation.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
So Seth, to elaborate on your point, if the bluestone did not have cracks, it would be impervious. So then it comes down to how quickly can it dissipate water, depending on the dimension of the cracks and depending on, let's say, if you have a storm that deposits an inch in 2 or 3 hours. And so, Paul, would you please take that into account, if you could, to sort of satisfy inquiring minds as to, in a rainstorm, where the water is going to go and how wide the cracks would be. So I think a fairly detailed drawing would be a help going forward, because Arthur has just read out our regulations. So notwithstanding where it is, I think it would help to take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other, Seth?
Sorry.
Oh.
To agree with Seth, we definitely need to update our regulations, and so please, I'm on bended knee to you, Jeff.
I know. I appreciate it. We all know we need to do the regs, but like we have so many things. So immediately when our schedule opens up, I talked to Jeff again about the regs this week.
Right. Right.
you know, we will do them, but I think
Right.
wasting meeting minutes is
All right,
tough.
I
So
apologize.
because we're gonna have a long one tonight, I'm afraid. Seth?
Yeah, last thing quickly. I mean, I think with the current language we have, without having a definition of what permeability means or what perviousness is, it's based on reviewing the design that is presented and making a vote of the commission as to what's pervious and what's impervious. So let's see the plan.
I agree with that. And then we'll be looking at runoff coefficients when we redo these regs. Any other questions or comments?
If I could just follow up, Ashley, before you, we're going to obviously continue, but if I could just hit on a few
Yes.
points. Go ahead. Well, with regard to the patio, I think when the regs do get revised, I think we all know where the patios are going to go. But we all know what has been permitted and what has been allowed with regard to patios up until this point. And with all due respect to Arthur's interpretation of that regulation, we can go back to every meeting and a lot of the applications, and we know how the patios have been viewed. And I think this application is consistent with what the board has previously permitted within that 25 to 50. I fully agree that the site walk, I think, would be helpful. So I think that's a great idea. I do not believe this is an eroding. This is a very stable bank. And I think when we look at properties that were permitted, whether they be on Kimball Ave or further down Cliff Road, I think the erosion rates will show us, number one, that, you know, while there's some change in the shoreline area, this bank is fully vegetated. And when you walk the site, I think you'll be able to see that also. And Maureen, with regard to the view shed, I mean, I think the photo that we started with the original, and when you look at what's built to the east and what's built to the west, I mean, I don't think this proposal here, the building is going to be placed in the same location as the buildings to the east and to the west, as they were put right up against the 50. And then the patio area is not going to affect anybody's view shed in that particular area. So if Arthur has anything else, we can, I guess, we'll go let the chair take it from there, but I'm happy to continue this from our end till the next meeting.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Are there any final comments or questions before we continue? All right, so this will continue until October 28th.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you. And that moves us on to Larrabee at 13 Millbrook Lane. And we have, Millbrook Road. That's what I thought. We have Millbrook Lane up here, and we have Jason Larrabee on for this one.
Yes, I am the applicant, and I'm here representing myself. If Jeff, do you have the lot plan up so I can show what I'm proposing? I guess not. Oh, here we go. Yes, my wife and I, along our property on 13 Millbrook Road, we would like to put up a fence along the Millbrook Road piece of the property only. Because, any questions? I mean,
I guess I'm having.
if the fence is technically within the buffer for the wetlands, so that is why I'm here asking for permission from you.
Okay, so the road essentially has migrated onto your property?
And actually into the, what is it considered? Wooded wetlands is what that piece is, and it's actually the road's moving in towards it.
Okay, I know I've noticed some dumping that occasionally takes place along, that's probably that parcel. Jeff?
Yeah, just to kind of add in a little bit. So when Jason came in and asked for some help to put this together, the way he described it pretty accurately, where the road has been drifting in, and what's been happening over time is as the road has moved kind of easterly, is it's definitely encroached into the 25-foot setback in spots and even kind of adjacent to the actual wetlands itself. As that road has been graded and regraded over time and it's encroached on. So Jason came in and asked for some help to get the road back within the layout off the property and out of that resource area. And we suggested putting up a fence and kind of had that discussion with him to keep that migration from happening into that wetland resource area. And I know when you look at the plan, it's not complete, as we did go out and kind of fill in the gaps, at least on site, for those wetland flags. And they do kind of vary up kind of closer to the road in some spots. Most of them seem to be kind of outside of that 25, but there's definitely some encroachment that's there. And last thing on the plan, just to make it clear that there's a sketch for a house that's on a plan. I know that's something that Jason has been talking to his surveyor and engineer, but that is not part of the proposal in this case. It's simply for the fencing on what would be the northerly and then the kind of two westerly property lines.
Yeah, the house is it's strictly experimental, so to speak. Just seeing how everything fits for future.
All right. Well, thank you. Because I've noticed changes in that road as well, I like to walk those land bank properties. I have been worried about like rogue grading going on, and has anybody talked to Mr. McGowan and his grading friends, because they do kind of go out a little bit willy-nilly, and this might be even an enforcement from Jeff if we're seeing this behavior?
Just from past experience, trying to talk with him and asking him, not to grade in a certain spot will only make him grade that spot more.
Okay. So I think it probably is worth a call to the Natural Resource Office to maybe get an enforcement out there. I mean, Jeff, is that a possibility?
I am more than happy to talk to Marty at any time.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners on this one? Looks like no. Ian?
Well, I would like to thank Mr. Larrabee for doing something of a public service.
Thank you.
I'm honestly happy that he came in, because a lot of times this is when fences show up without permits, is people just take matters into their own hands. So from a staff level, we appreciate it too.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments from commissioners, we'll open it up to the public. Does not look like we have anything on YouTube. So Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close this one?
We do.
All right, Jason, would you like to close?
Yes.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Ian.
Second.
Is there a seconded by Linda? So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 22 Easton Street LLC at 22 and 24 Easton Street, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden, representing the applicants. The proposed project involves the reconstruction of a primary dwelling with guest house, studio, garage, pool, patio, decking, utilities, and landscaping. All the proposed structures are outside or greater than 50 feet from the top of the coastal bank along the harbor. There's a bulkhead along the waterfront. The entire property is located within the flood zone. Closer towards the harbor, it's located within a velocity zone. There's no proposed work within the velocity zone. The remaining portion of the site is within floodplain AE elevation 7. The proposed structure is going to sit on a shallow crawl space foundation with flood vents with the first floor elevation at 8.25. So 1 foot above the floodplain elevation. The garage closer towards Easton Street will be on slab with flood vents. And typical storage conditions would certainly apply for the garage. Runoff from the proposed structures is going to be directed to perimeter stone infiltration trenches. And the project has been designed in compliance with flood zone standards for flood control and storm damage prevention. And Jeff, I don't know if you have the landscape plan that shows a little bit more detail on how everything fits, but sorry. But I'll turn it over.
Give me
to-
1 second and I'll dig it out.
All right, thanks.
You can keep talking. It's gonna take a second.
I'll turn it over to questions at this point.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So while Jeff's looking for that plan, are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no at this point. Oh, Ian?
But it wasn't in our package, was it? I didn't find it in my package.
It should have been included as the appendix right before.
Yeah, it's not in my, I'm with you. Not in my
No,
packet either.
the entire application was missing from our package.
Oh, the entire application.
Yeah.
Let's see. So no one's had a chance to review this?
No. Well, I didn't,
Okay, there's a landscape plan. Let me look into this. Missing
Wow.
issue.
Oh, Jeff, now you're, oh, there we go.
Was this the old Stanford folks lot?
Your memory would be better than mine.
God. Yeah.
We're getting there. The landscape plan is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think it just kind of fills it in a little bit more.
Are there any questions from commissioners at this point on Brian's presentation and the plans that we've seen?
Well, I would hope, Brian, that you would defer to waiting for another 2 weeks so that we could actually see it, since right now all I can do is lift up my magnifying glass.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that because I don't know why it didn't make the pack. That's so weird because it's in all of the materials that we uploaded, but it didn't appear in the listing there. Sorry about that. I missed it.
I noticed that, I mean, the packet was also scrambled. So maybe, maybe there's
Yeah.
a ransomware in your future. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It normally is in such nice, neat order. I don't know. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, there's probably some tech glitch in there.
It's in the parent file, which is kind of weird that the file that I uploaded where it's all sorted out was there and I just missed it. I blame Joanne. I have to do it now instead of her.
She's gonna come after you if you keep blaming her.
She's not watching.
All right.
So yeah, I
It's a
mean,
very-
we were hoping to close, but given the fact that everyone hasn't had a chance to review it in advance, they were hoping to start work and demo the existing house ASAP, but to give everyone enough time to review this adequately. We will continue, but if I can answer any questions right now, it's, no waivers are required for the project. Again, all the work is outside of the 50-foot buffer zone and just within flood zone, and it's been designed in compliance with flood zone standards.
What's
Thank
the
you.
elevation of the, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
Excuse me for interrupting. Thank you, Ashley. What's the elevation of all those walkways around the property? I noticed there's like wooden walkways, am I right?
Yeah, those will be at grade. We'll kind of mix levels. There's some are at grade, some are elevated to get up to the house, obviously.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no at this point. I guess I'll do a quick check of the public in case anybody had questions on this one. It looks like not on YouTube. So if there are no further questions or comments, Brian, the next meeting is October 28th, so we'll continue until then.
Yeah, and I guess would it be appropriate to have a order ready at that meeting date?
I think Jeff could probably have one drafted.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we're getting.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
all right.
continue to the 28th.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Skeffington, Silva at 14 Harborview Way. And we have Ryan Maxwell on for this one.
Thank you. Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering.
Madam Chairman, I have to recuse. This is a longstanding project of mine.
Okay. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, so this notice of intent is for work within land subject to coastal storm flowage and also work within 100 feet of a coastal beach. So the coastal beach here is on the other side of Harborview Way, and it's defined by that wood bulkhead that you see on the plan. All of our proposed work is going to be outside of the 50-foot buffer to that coastal beach. The project is to raise the existing structure 1 foot and then to construct an addition at the same elevation as you see on the plan. That's more or less the project, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. So we'll open it up to the public. Are there any questions from the public on this one? Also looks like no at this point. Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close? Ryan, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close? Ian?
I do have a question because I noticed that the lot is pretty much full. And I'm wondering whether there's going to be an infiltration system or where is rainwater going to go at this point? Is it going to go in the neighbor's yard?
No, we could add some infiltration for the roofs if we could condition that.
Yeah. Thank you.
We can definitely add something like that.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ian, for your question. Are there any other questions? Again, if not, is there a motion to issue? Maureen, are you making the motion?
Motion to close.
Yes.
Motion to close. Is there a second seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, so that carries with Commissioner Williams recused. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Kane at 12 Pond Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden from LEC, representing the Canes. The proposed project involves an addition, reconfigured deck, garage studio, a new driveway, utility connections, and landscaping. There's a new proposed driveway off of Pond. This property sits at the corner of Meadowview and Pond. The house, the small house, dates back to 1980. The proposed garage, studio, and driveway connection are outside the 100-foot buffer zone, or partially outside the 100-foot buffer zone, just on the outer edge, in the corner of the lot. The proposed addition is on the west side, southwest side of the existing home. A portion of it is within the 50-foot buffer zone. However, they are making significant improvements in and around the resource areas as mitigation. 126 square feet of existing deck between the 25 and 50-foot buffer zone is being removed. At the closest point, that deck is 26 feet away. The new deck is being relocated further away and will be situated on sonotubes. At the closest point, that will be 33 feet away. There's an existing shed in the southeasterly corner of the lawn that is proposed to be removed. And portions of that 25-foot buffer zone are proposed to be revegetated, totaling 567 square feet with native shrubs. And we are asking for a waiver for the reconstruction work within the 50-foot buffer zone. However, the proposed work is increasing wetland setbacks, removing structures within the 25 and decreasing within the 50-foot buffer zone, and added with the revegetation. Proposed runoff from the structures is being directed to subsurface infiltration systems, and the proposed addition will sit on a crawl space, but the bottom of the footing has been set at 19.3, elevation 19.3, which is just above documented high groundwater based on soil borings on site. So we feel that the proposed project will result in a significant improvement over existing conditions. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian.
No problem.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, the existing deck, is that, is there a foundation or support for that, or is that just laid at grade? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, it's somewhat of a little bit of a walkout in the back. It is elevated. I want to say maybe between 4 to 5 feet off grade. In the corner of the house, there's an area way with the sunken basement access. So it's basically shifting the deck further away from the resource area to increase that setback, and then revegetate the 25-foot up until the point where the access around the structure is required. And if you can see, it's pretty tight to that areaway corner. Just we were attempting to maximize that revegetation area.
Thank you, Brian. Seth?
Thank you. And I certainly understand some of the intent here. I think moving the deck farther away and revegetation is good, but I'm not sure I agree with the idea of long-term net benefit. You are going to be adding an addition, which is an enclosed structure, who's going to be within the 2-foot separation of high groundwater. And there's going to be new structure within the 50-foot buffer. I know it's a reconfiguration of what already exists, but it seems like 2 waivers required, with the benefit just being a bit of vegetative restoration. I think the idea of changing the outlay of the deck, I could get behind that. I'm not sure I see the long-term net benefit with the proposed project, though.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Seth. Just to parse it out a little bit, I would interpret the groundwater separation. We purposely set the bottom of the footing above high groundwater to avoid any intrusion, the need for dewatering. So I see that as a no adverse impact situation. The improvements for that long-term net benefit, do involve increasing the wetland setbacks, reducing structure within the 50-foot, and then removing the shed, which is in the 25-foot, and then revegetating the 25 to the max extent practical here. So, I would hope that those 4 mitigation elements could provide that long-term net benefit in the commission's eyes.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Seth, for your questions. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like, Mark.
I guess I'm a little troubled by the construction of the addition in the 25 to 50-foot zone, and the proposed deck is like you're almost swapping square feet for square feet, and moving it back a little bit. I understand, but it's still in the zone. I'm not sure I see the net benefit, particularly when you're building a real structure in the 25 to 50-foot zone. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments? Maureen, and then Ian, I'll go to you.
I apologize. I'm using a different machine and I can't figure out how to get my hand always visible. I just want to say I agree with both Mark and Seth about the location of the deck. The mitigation doesn't seem to me to be sufficiently significant to allow us to look at this as a net benefit. It's too much work within the 50. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Ian, I'll go to you.
Yeah, well, there we go. I'll add my voice to the opposition, especially the construction within the 25 to 50 of the actual dwelling. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So if there is not any more comments or questions from commissioners, I'll open it up to the public. I just saw Joe Topham's hand up.
Yep.
So Joe, we'll go to you.
Hi, guys. So 2 comments. One, if I swung the deck from the east elevation over to the south, Jeff, can you bring up the plan? And then that middle section, the connector, if I got rid of that foundation, would that help? What that would allow to do is any water that was coming from, say, the garage studio area would be able to go into the wetland. It really wouldn't impact any lessening of water that would go down to that wetland area. But I think if I took the proposed deck and moved it onto where the water filtration system is, would that help mitigate some of these issues that you guys are having with? And the other thing that I'm kind of working with is, as much as I want to move the structure out, I also am trying to play in between the Concom and the HCC, and I know that doesn't matter to you, but sitting from my chair, I'm trying to work both angles. And if I could screen share, I can just show you what I'm looking to do. It's not really that large of a structure.
Sure, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, see if I can do this real quickly. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it, but it's kind of small.
How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so that's the existing footprint. That's the proposed, and the dark red is where we're having the most concerns about. But I think I can take this new deck and swing that around. But then the small addition, that I would need a foundation, but the little connector with a door and the window, I could have that open. And you can also see how the existing crawls, it's actually, there's a bedroom down there, but that bedroom down in the basement, existing basement, does not get any water. So it's kind of interesting that we found water higher than the existing foundation. But I just want to say that those would be a couple options that we could work on.
Thank you, Joe. Seth, it looks like you have a comment.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is probably for Brian, not Joe, but was only one auger pit dug. I know this tends to be a pretty variable water table here, so you may be able to confirm a few more test pits and get some updated information for us.
I can confirm that Bracken did the soil boring, and you know, the size of the addition is relatively, you know, small, 620 square feet. I believe it was done, you know, somewhat centrally located. In that location, you know, it was based off of indicators of redox, not actual observed water. So I would agree that, well, this neighborhood is, you know, notoriously has wonky groundwater. So it can be hit or miss. And, you know, as Joe indicated, you know, there's a full basement in the existing structure that doesn't see any water. And we're staying above it. You know, the wetland itself, you know, it stems off of a small pond, and it's, you know, surrounded by developed conditions. And there's wetlands across the street, across Meadowview to the west as well. But I think the soil boring we took is somewhat representative, but you could probably go another 10 feet and get slightly different result. So I think that taking that one as the highest is probably the best measure.
Thank you, Brian. And Joe, thank you for sharing your screen and your ideas. I think it would definitely be at least more helpful to have that deck shift from my perspective anyway. Are there any other comments from the public on this one? RJ?
Thank you, Chair Ersman. It's probably a question for Joe as well. From the Land Council's perspective, we're always concerned with structures in the 50 and especially habitable space. So is there any way that the addition can be reconfigured to stay out of the 50? Definitely more of a concern than the deck, although the deck still is a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Joe, do you have a response to that? And then Ian, I'll go to you.
Yes, Madam Chair. RJ, the HTC would want to see this addition to be subordinate and set back. So if you look at the plan, I'm only set back about a foot. So that's kind of what the architectural elements I'm playing with. But I think by having that center connector floating, having no foundation, because it's only 8 feet long, I can have that almost like a bridge, which would allow any water to flow underneath. So I really don't see any impact. Plus, this house has been there since I think 84, 82, 84, and there's been no adverse effects. And when I was a kid, used to go riding by this all the time, and there's plenty of vegetation and wildlife within there. So it's crazy to say this, but that house has had really no impact. I think that removing the shed is a really net benefit on that property. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And RJ for your question. Ian, I'll go to you. Oh, you're muted.
Excuse me. Joe, you're very good health, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Cheers.
All right, so if there are no other questions from commissioners, it also looks like we don't have any questions or any more questions from the public. Would you guys like to continue for 3 weeks and try and sharpen the pencils, I guess?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue until October 28th.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Miss you guys.
You too, Maddie.
All right, so that moves us on to 8 Walsh LLC at 8 Walsh Street, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application for work within land subject to coastal storm flowage, as well as the buffer zone to a border and vegetated wetland. And we are down on Brant Point on Walsh Street on an existing developed residential property. The proposal before you shown in red is to remove an existing garage and construct a new structure further away from the vegetated wetland. Shown is also the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones. As you can see, the existing structure is about 3 feet away from the wetland boundary, and we would increase that to be about 7 feet away. There are not a lot of alternatives on the site, so we're doing our best to make it better than what currently exists by shifting it away. The site is long since maintained, and all the work is proposed within maintained lawn and driveway area. There have been waivers requested, which would be for work within the 25-foot buffer zone, as well as structure within the 50-foot buffer zone, on the basis that it would be a long-term net benefit to move the structure further away from what the resource area than what currently exists. And shown in green is the proposed silt fence and limit of work. We would use a slab on grade type foundation system and minimize any disturbance to the extent possible, and then restore any disturbed areas. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions or concerns that you may have with the application.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have pretty significant reservations about the project as proposed. I understand the desire to increase structure within the 25-foot buffer, see that as a benefit. But if you look at the summation of what's happening, proposed to happen on this site within the 50-foot no build zone, the amount of area or structural area is actually increasing slightly. And I think that in addition to that increase, you are taking a garage, which I'm not sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears like from the photos is just at grade, doesn't have a footing or a pier associated with it. And now you're talking about a habitable space that has a pier that's extending into the 2-foot separation that high groundwater. I personally don't think this meets the qualification for long-term net benefit. And I also don't think, I know this wasn't requested, but it would be my opinion that it also doesn't meet the requirement for no adverse impacts, no reasonable alternatives as currently proposed. I think there's ways to re-envision the structure, or maybe re-envision that footing or change the area, but right now I'm pretty concerned with what's proposed.
Thank you, Seth. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? I have to agree with Seth, although we're shifting slightly out of the 25, I don't see this as a long-term net benefit because of the kind of overall increase of the footprint and the not foundation, but the slab. Mark, I saw your hand up. Oh, we're not.
Yeah, okay, there we go. I just share your thoughts, actually. It's quite a jump in usage, which is interesting, but I mean, going from a small one-story garage to in essence, a living quarters. And also I agree, I'm not sure I see the net benefit. Working in that zone is something we don't normally approve. You had to rebuild the garage, that would be one. If you had to rebuild the garage, it would be one thing, but this is a far cry from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. So at this point, I'll open it up to the public. Mr. Phillips?
Hi, I'm Charles Phillips. I live at 4 Swain Street. I abut this property to the north and the west. I'm right on that property line. I strongly oppose the second story on this garage that's going to be turned into a studio plus. I'm concerned about the grading. I'm also concerned about the addition that was approved by HDC in May that is being actually started now, and that's within the 25 to 50 foot. So they're actually going to be taking up essentially within 50 feet of the wetlands by that addition, and then to add insult to injury, improve this garage, / studio into a 2-story building. So I'm strongly opposed to it.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Doesn't look like we have any other public comment. So Art?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of responses. The structure that's there is currently a slab on grade with a concrete frost wall that likely sits on a footing of some sort. We don't know exactly what's there, but clearly, you wouldn't typically just lay concrete block on virgin soil. So, there is a footing that does exist, I would expect. And so I have heard your concerns, but I do want you to know that, if you look, there is a frost wall, if you will, that goes around the slab that's there. the point of the second story. I think with respect to protected wetland interests, if we're looking at the footprint within the buffer zone, I don't necessarily see how any of the protected interests are adversely affected by adding on top of that. I hear what you're saying with the increase of the footprint from the exact size of the structure, but whether it's 1 story or 2 stories, when we're looking at within a buffer zone, the specific protected interests, I'm not sure which ones would be considered to be adversely impacted if there was essentially no increase in impervious area. That being said, I do understand that there is an incremental increase there, which is a little bit different. But the first story versus second story, I'm not sure how that is a negative impact. And then to Mr. Phillips' comments, there's just to clarify, if I could, there's no grading proposed, so we would match existing grade.
Thank you, Art. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Seth?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Art for clarifying the footing of the existing structure. It helps put things in perspective. I think that there may be an impact with the second story related to wetland scenic views. I'm not sure it applies in this specific case, but I think it may apply in some cases.
Thank you, Seth. Any other questions or comments from commissioners or members of the public who are on? Maureen?
There we are. Sorry. I'm now on my 3rd device. This is just not going well tonight. I guess my question was about the fact that this kind of renovation of this structure, how is that get done without disturbance to, within the 25? It is a significant change, and I know, again, the issues of whether adding a story or not is, to me, that still work within the 25. So, but I would like to know how it is proposed that this be torn down and built. So if Art could answer that.
Thank you, Maureen. Art, do you have a reply?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So we would, as shown on the plan, there would be a silt fence installed along the perimeter of the work, essentially along the edge of the wetland. And then I would envision that we would use an excavator to, remove the structure. We probably would stage a dumpster in the driveway. They would fill the dumpster with the superstructure in terms of any of the timber, and then use a dump truck and dig out any of the concrete that's there. Certainly there would be disturbance within the 25. That waiver has been requested in order to do this work. And then we would construct a new foundation, slightly further away within that area, and then restore it all to match existing grade. Again, all working from the upland away from the wetland, reaching in and pulling the materials back in order to do that.
Thank you, Art. Jeff?
Hey, real quickly, this has really nothing to do with performance standards of the filing. I just wanted to make everyone aware. Commissioner Williams had to leave the call, so she's not with us for the rest of the meeting tonight.
Great, thank you. I noticed she dropped off. Ian, do you have yep, Ian.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a question to Mr. Phillips. Well, I'm certainly sympathetic to the issue of having a larger structure right next to your house that, as Art said, really isn't our purview. And from the Google aerial, it looks as though your lawn goes right down to the wetland. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a pocket wetland that is surrounded by houses. There's a house that looks as though it's built right on it. And so I'm leaning towards feeling that Art's client has done enough in mitigation to allow it to go forward. I mean, you know, it's a vestigial wetland, sadly. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Can I respond?
Yes, Charles, go ahead.
So I guess my comment is that I would not have a problem if they replaced that garage as it is, but I don't think that they should be able to improve it and improve it dramatically. They're within the 25, and if we're going to be serious about flooding in Brant Point and Nantucket, I mean, we need to hold the line here. We cannot just approve these things willy-nilly, and you know, no build means no build. That's my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners or the public at this point? Looks like no. Art, what would you like to do here? Would you like to continue and look at the size of the structure again?
Yes, to the 28th, please, Madam Chair.
Okay, so this will continue until October 28th then.
Thank you.
Oh, Ian?
Well, just so to take Mr. Phillips' point into consideration, is this actually within the floodplain, or is it outside of the floodplain?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yep,
Completely within the flood zone.
It is within the flood zone. So, and so it's not, how are you taking that into account, Art?
So it's a, again, it's a slab on grade, so it doesn't have to meet the flood zone requirements, building requirements for occupied habitable space. So essentially it doesn't allow floodwaters in now, and it wouldn't as proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. All right, so I think that's the final question. So we will continue until October 28th. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
That moves us on to Eat Fire Spring Trust 2018 at 12 Margaret's Way, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application for work in the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. The project includes the upgrade of an existing septic system to include innovative alternative technology, as well as to construct a shed outside of the 50-foot buffer zone, and as well as to construct a small cottage type structure, also greater than 50 feet from the buffer zone. We've structured this so that the work could occur in two phases. The first phase would be to install the new septic tank, 2-compartment septic tank, and innovative alternative technology, and tie into the existing septic system, which has passed Title V inspection, and that would serve the house that's there. And then if the owners are able to move forward with their their plans to construct a cottage, then at that point an entire new septic system would be installed, and the IA system would be shifted from the existing leach trenches to the new leach trenches, which are shown in the southeast property corner outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So it's a sort of a two-phase project to, utilize what they can by adding IA and doing the upgrade. And then, if there was going to be any expansion of the structure, not withstanding the shed, which obviously has no plumbing associated with it, then it would be a new leach field as well. And the work for the piping, which would occur partially within the 25-foot buffer zone, would be down the existing driveway. There's really, I shouldn't say no alternative. I mean, there's an alternative that you could go, if you look at the plan, further away and sort of bisect those wetlands. But when you really see this property, then it becomes readily apparent that the least impact is to keep it in the driveway. There's some, well-established vegetation and growth. And I don't think that it would be in the best interest of meeting the interest protected by the commission to move the pipe slightly further away from a wetland and then have to disturb vegetation than it is to go down the driveway. So I did want to just point that out, that we did look at those alternatives. And again, that would just be backfilled and restored within the driveway area. And the actual tanks which are going in are just outside of or partially just barely in the 100-foot buffer zone. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions, concerns, or comments that you might have with the application.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. So we'll check and see if there are any questions or comments from the public. So looks like no on YouTube. Art, did you?
Madam Chair, if I may, we would request a continuance until the 28th, just to allow the response time for natural heritage.
Great, thank you. So it looks like if there's no comments or questions from commissioners, then we will continue until October 28th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. So that moves us on. And Jeff, I'm realizing, I think I skipped the land bank island-wide land bank properties to accept the withdrawal.
Well, yeah, all we have to do is someone just needs to make a motion to accept the withdrawal.
Yeah, so I apologize for kind of missing that one with the continuances. Ian?
I'm adding to your apologies for not catching it and making a motion to approve of the withdrawal.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Seth, are you second?
And
Great.
if you hadn't remembered, I had it for you. But
Okay, thank you. Ready to catch me. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Great, that carries unanimously. And then we can move on to amended orders of conditions. We have Nantucket Conservation Foundation at Long Pond, represented by Naomi Valentine and Karen Beatty.
Sorry, I had to remove that background. I forgot I had that on. Naomi Valentine from SWCA, representing the Nantucket Conservation Foundation in regard to our request for an amended order of conditions with the Long Pond order of conditions under Mass DEP file number 48-3385. So we were able to successfully conduct herbicide application and pre-herbicide application cutting. The herbicide application of the Phragmites on this project area was completed in its entirety, but the hopeful cutting back of Phragmites prior to herbicide application was only able to be conducted over a small portion. And all that will be detailed in our report at the end of the year per our order of conditions, like I mentioned in the request. But the reason that we're coming before you today is that it quickly became apparent that it would not be very feasible or safe to the people conducting the manual cutting and removal to continue with that method of the proposed method of mixed mechanical and herbicide application for the Phragmites. A lot of that has to do with the fairly tall poison ivy that's pretty well interspersed throughout the Phragmites population on that south east portion of Long Pond. So what we're proposing is to use the same method of Phragmites cutting that's been approved on a few other projects on island, a couple on Hummock Pond, the western shoreline of Long Pond, and another at Consu Springs, which is to use a marsh master with a mowing deck to cut down the Phragmites following herbicide application. And the Conservation Foundation does have that scheduled if it's approved. I believe I can let Karen Beatty respond to that. Scheduled if it's approved at this hearing to occur this year, so that the Phragmites can be cut prior to next growing season. So that's the entire change request. I can accept any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Naomi. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
I just want to say that I've seen this Marsh Master in action on Long Pond, on I guess Hummock Pond it was, and it's been very successful. So I think this makes a great deal of sense to use that in lieu of obviously putting people into the deadly grasp of poison ivy.
I have to say, so I did a wetland delineation out there like 10 years ago, and the poison ivy oils were actually able to get through my clothing. The poison ivy was like so dense there. It was the worst case of poison ivy I have ever gotten, but it is really quite intense.
Wow. Well, we did make an effort to remove the Phragmites, but I think the crew would agree with your comments, Madam Chair.
Ian?
Yes, so through you to Naomi, so were you worried about compacting with the Marsh Master, why you didn't sort of do it initially, or what were your concerns and how are you going to mitigate them going forward? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, the concern wasn't for compaction. It was just a desire of the Conservation Foundation to try out sort of like utilizing the existing Phragmites as a kind of bioremediation method, because there's some concerns within the pond itself for high nutrient levels. So our hope was that we could access enough of the Phragmites, remove the existing biomass and take some of that nutrients with it. But we weren't sure how much of it we were going to be able to remove by hand. And that was the reason. It wasn't a concern that it would worsen current conditions or impact soil, but that we were hoping we could remove the Phragmites from the area.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. So I'll open it up to the public to see if they have questions. Does not look like we have questions on YouTube. So Jeff, do we have everything we would need to issue the amended order?
Yes, you could close an issue if you wanted to.
Okay. Is there a motion to issue the amended order? A motion
Also
made by.
move.
I'm going to give it to Maureen, Mark. I think she beat you with her hand. And then I'll give you the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
You guys too. All right, so that moves us on in the public meeting to requests for determination of applicability. We have D. Biasio at 39 Meadowview Drive, represented by David Haynes.
Good evening. David Haynes for the applicant. This is an application for a request for determination. You may recognize it. You heard it a couple of weeks ago as a notice of intent to move one of the garden sheds there out of the 50-foot no structure setback and off the site. The But at that time, the delineation was not confirmed. And so we're asking with a request for determination to confirm that delineation. The resource areas on the site are, there's land underwater under Lake Sylvia to the southwest, and then there's the bank around Lake Sylvia, which is the double line on the plan that you see there. And then there is a bordering vegetated wetland with flags number 1 through 10. That's a shrub swamp and a small area of wet meadow. The lawn in front of the house goes right down to the wetland boundary, and it is lawn, it's distinct. There is a slope there, comes up to the house location. We did verify this line and reviewed it with Jeff Carlson by looking at soils. The vegetation also in the lawn area is upland vegetation, and there is a distinct break and slope where it goes to wetland vegetation. The soils were strongly non-hydric in the upland, and it transgressed to wetland soils below the wetland boundary. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And we're just asking for a verification of the wetland boundary.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Well, so David, were you practicing with your silver nitrate vintage photographs?
They do go through, I do sepia.
Okay. Because it's fairly unusual to have them in that black and in that sort of half-tone black and white.
I didn't see what maybe they got, I thought I set them off. They may have gone through as by scanning them, they may have been distorted. I'll try to improve my graphics, but I'm getting.
This is what they look like.
Well, a whole lot of color, does it? I'll get out my my felt tip pens.
There we go. There we go.
I don't know how many plans I colored in with those.
All right, Jeff, has staff
my graphics.
Has staff been out to confirm these the resource area boundaries?
Yeah, we actually had a really productive site visit with David and Regina Haynes out on the site there, and I would confirm. And I think, interestingly enough, this is one of those interesting cases where when you look at a disturbed site, obviously the soils could be a little bit funky because there's been some fill over time on that site. But between the break and slope of the soils, and then interestingly enough, as we kind of transition through the lawn, you could actually see the lawn transition from kind of a grass and clover blend on the one end. When you got down below the wetland line, that clover got replaced pretty quickly with little stands of marsh pennywort that's in there. So it was a pretty clear break to us. And then we kind of continued on for the rest of the line around in all ways. So we came to agreement. I know we had some other information in the file for some other spots, but I think current conditions and current assessment that the bordering vegetated wetland line, the inland bank line, and then the water line are accurate as shown.
Okay.
It should be a positive 2A.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So if there aren't any other questions or comments from commissioners, would somebody like to make the motion to issue the positive 2A conforming the resource area boundaries? Seth, are you making that motion?
So moved.
All right, is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, David.
Thank you all very much, and have a nice evening. What's left of it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
You too. All right, so that moves us on to Nisda at 71 Washington Street, and this is represented by Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you. Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering. So this RDA is for work within land subject to coastal zone flowage. The application is actually for 3 separate properties. each with their own structure on them. And what the applicant wants to do is simply to remove the structures and just level off whatever hole might be left, and then just loam and seed the area. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, have you been out to the site and do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I would recommend that this would be a -2 for allow for work in the resource area without requiring the notice of intent.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
Yeah, since this is an RDA, do we have the ability to condition the fill like we do with orders of conditions?
Yeah, sure.
Could we please do that?
Mhm.
All right.
Condition it as just like clean fill. Okay.
All
Yeah,
right, so
I mean, I don't know if we need to read out what the requirement is, but it's essentially clean fill.
Okay.
so would somebody like to make the motion then to issue the -2 allowing for the work with the condition that any fill brought in be clean fill? And I know the language on that will be a little bit different. Seth?
So moved.
All right, Maureen, are you giving the second?
Second, yes.
Okay. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to minor modifications. We have Atkinson at 82 Baxter Road, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a proposal to make a slight rotation to a structure that was approved within the buffer zone to a vegetated wetland. And that rotation will take the structure further away from the resource area. But it is within your jurisdiction. And before we get started on the project, just want to make sure that we're not coming in afterwards with something that's different from the approval. I don't really think it's substantial, but it's still rather have the commission review it and let me know if there are any concerns before we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments about the minor mod? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have everything we would need to issue the minor mod?
Yes, you do.
Okay, is there a motion to issue the minor mod? Mark, are you making a motion or saying 1 minute?
I'm saying the motion.
Okay, so motion made by Mark. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. Excuse me. Seth got you, Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. And that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have delay at 11 Osprey Way.
I'm on meter already. So this is an older one. This was issued in 1999. This was for the construction and maintenance of an addition, a deck, and a porch that were about 60 feet from the resource area. From the plans and our inspection, we found it to be in compliance and recommend that it could be issued.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments for Jeff? And if not, is there a motion to issue the cert?
I so moved.
So Maureen made the motion. Ian, do you want the second?
Why not?
All right, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to orders of conditions. Jeff sent these out earlier. And we will begin with Moore's Realty Trust at 14 Touchymo Way.
Yes, so this is one that we closed last time. This was the one that had the two retaining wall, the little retaining wall kind of structure along Hummock Pond, just to kind of jog everyone's memory. So the conditions kind of that I had from the notes related to that, we just had that the commission shall be provided notice for any future maintenance on the retaining walls with photographs provided showing kind of before and after conditions. But that was really it. It didn't seem to, I mean, it's just kind of maintaining what's there.
Thank you, Jeff. Steph?
This may be contained in the record, but I'd asked for all the cobble and sandbags to be removed. So can we condition that excess extraneous material gets removed?
So I'll add a 20 that all extra cobble and sandbags shall be removed from the resource area.
Thank you, Jeff. I also remember Seth talking about that last time. Are there any other amendments, Ian?
Was there some concern about the way that there'd been an addition to the, I'm losing my compass points, but I think to the western end of the bulkhead, that there was a certain discontinuity and we were worried about that? Or
Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I did bring that up as something I was concerned about and asked the project representative if they could try to get their client to like square those meeting points up.
Right.
It sounded like they offered to do their best, but if we want to condition that to be required, I think we can do that.
No, if they're going to do their best, that's fine.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If there aren't any other amendments, would somebody like to make a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to RJG Nominee Trust at 13 Crow's Nest Way. Jeff?
So real quickly, just on the actual printed agenda, I didn't draft an order for 19 East Creek Road. Am I safe to assume, I'm happy to review the minutes again, that we're looking for a positive order for that project at this point with the pergola being removed and the adjustments that they made?
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I need. All right. Onward and upward.
Thank you, Jeff. So now we're looking at RJG Nominee Trust at 13 Crow's Nest Way.
Yes. So this was for the, excuse me, this is for the septic replacement, kind of in that coastal dune area out on Crow's Nest Way. So I kind of included our standard conditions for that. The materials are stored outside of the 50-foot setback, and then for photographs of that area that they end up restoring and planting for kind of 3 years.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any amendments, questions, comments?
Move to approve as drafted.
Right, is there a
Second.
second? Seconded by Mark. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Nantucket Islands Land Bank, rear Bacchus Lane. The one with the pigs.
Yes, this is the one with the pigs.
Not
So
goats, not sheep.
I just had a reporting thing, and then I'll need to add in something. I won't bore everyone with the language, but the waiver that we talked about related to the work within the wetland resource area. I was gonna, I think from the discussion, draft up that waiver related to long-term net benefit for the removal of invasive species within the resource area. But it'll probably read pretty similar to how most of our other waiver requests like that read. So if we could issue as amended, I'm happy to draft that up. But if anyone else has any other conditions, I'll be honest, I haven't conditioned invasive species removal by pig before. So that's kind of what it was.
I think
Mark?
it was discussed that we will ask them to grade and seed the area with appropriate plant material. Was not discussed? I mean, it's going to be uprooted by our pig friends.
We
Wouldn't it
did
be,
talk about stabilizing the soil, yeah.
Yeah, was
I don't-
something. I don't know. I don't know
How
what.
about
Maybe you
we'll
can
add
help us with
condition
that.
20 that prior to restabilization, they'll come in with a minor mod to describe what work they need to do. Does that work for everybody?
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's good. Seth?
Yeah, I think that's the right strategy here because given that it's experimental, you might find it you need more than 1 year of maintenance to get that root material of the knotweed out. So it would be not the best to have them plant new stuff and then bring the pigs again and then plant again. So plant when the invasives have been removed, and we can follow up from there.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, so I just added a 20. It says prior to the site being restabilized, the applicant shall file a minor modification to describe any additional restoration needed. And then they can come in and talk about what they're going to do.
Thank you, Jeff. Ian, did you have something to add?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Only that, my last experience with pigs was, that were rooting goes back practically pre-Christian. And and there's nothing left, if you have them on there long enough, it's just absolutely just all it is hoof prints. So
I agree. They leave the place a wreck.
well, it depends how you want to look at it, but that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I think that's the idea here because knotweed roots are so dense under there. So hopefully with just a week or two of those pigs, it won't be destruction. It'll be a positive, but we'll see.
Right.
Round up.
I'll just say, not to put my hand in here, but we've actually used the pigs around the farm to do like understory cleanup of areas where we've seen both bittersweet and porcelainberry, which I know are not quite as hardy as knotweed, but they do an absolutely amazing job in short order, and it takes care of it pretty good. If you monitor it really close, we haven't seen any damage to the trees and things in the area, but you just got to stay on top of them. You can't let them sit for 3 or 4 weeks without moving them. So hopefully the short time, I'm really kind of interested to see how it goes because we've had some success with other invasives just because it's easier than trying to chemically treat it. And the pigs are happy to do it. So it's been okay, but I think it just takes good monitoring.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody, on this one. Is there a motion to issue as amended? Motion made by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erickson, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Jason Larrabee at 13 Millbrook Road. Wasn't a ton on this one. It's just the fence.
Yeah, I just didn't really have any conditions because they're just putting in a fence. And I will I'll get in touch with Marty as well, as an aside. That's not really related to the project.
You have a miscellaneous 20 in there, Jeff.
I do?
I not in mine.
I have 18, 19, and 20 is blank.
That's the one before.
Oh,
That's
quite
Heather
right.
Lane, maybe.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
That's Heather Lane.
yeah, and we haven't closed that one yet. So
No,
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm right.
that's all right. It's caught for next time.
it's all right. It's good to know.
Move to approve as drafted.
Right, is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelberg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimous. And then we're on the Skeffington Silva at 14 Harborview Way.
Sorry, I just messed up here.
Ian, do you have a comment, question, addition?
Well, yes, I'd like, I think I'd like us to add something about the infiltration system so that doesn't get lost.
So would recommend adding a number 20 that says all roof runoff shall be directed to a subsurface infiltration system.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other amendments? And if not, is there a motion to approve as amended? Motion made by Seth, seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. So that moves us on to other business. We have approval of minutes from September 23rd. And thank you, Terry, as always, for the minutes. Does anybody have any amendments, or is there a motion to approve as drafted?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And again, thank you, Terry, for your always amazing minutes.
Thank you, Terry.
We have monitoring reports on there. I don't think we had any. So that moves us on to reports. We have crack.
Well, nothing that you don't know about already. Arcadis is presenting as we speak, I think, their final memo about Baxter Road to the select board. And those sort of final drafts being put together for the resiliency plan. And that should come out towards the end of this month, I believe.
Thank you, Ian. CPC.
We have held all of our hearings. There were 3.5 days of hearings regarding applicants' interviews with people that would like CPC money, and we've completed those. And the next 2 meetings are decide how to give away $3.3 million with $9 million in requests.
Thank you, Mark. That is a tough decision you guys have to make, or decisions. All right, NP and EDC.
We have not had a meeting.
All right, thank you. So now on to commissioners' comments. I know I'll start. Jeff and I have been talking about the regs update, the regulatory update, and how that fits into all the other meetings we seem to perpetually need to schedule. We did talk about potentially doing like a workshop day, maybe on a Saturday, you know, actually to get it all done. So I don't know, you know, once probably Sconset Bluff calms down a little bit, we'll try and look at more dates for that.
Not going to calm down.
Hopefully a little bit. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we update our regulations, do we need to update the bylaw as well, or just the regulations? I ask because I know that town meeting warrant article submission is open now and will be through November, but you know, I don't think we'll probably get it done by then, but does it have to wait till next year to get updated, or we don't really worry about that?
That's a good question for Jeff.
So I've been looking at it. I'm not sure there's a section in particular that would need to get updated with regulatory changes in the bylaw. I have just kind of precautionarily, that we've been talking about it, kind of put a placeholder that we may have some small bylaw changes to make in there, which gives us a little flexibility warrant wise, because if it's a town sponsored article, it doesn't necessarily have the same deadlines for submission as a citizen warrant article does. And town manager usually says, hey, if you're going to have one, let me know sooner than later. And I said, we may have some cleanup to do in the bylaw. So I'll firm up that date, but if we don't use it, we don't. And then whatever we change in the regulations, obviously the bylaw most importantly grants us the ability to interpret the bylaw through the regulations. So it's much more responsive. So I'm not super concerned about it, but it is a good point. But we do have kind of a placeholder just in case.
Thank you for bringing that up, Seth. Mark?
Just a question for Jeff, actually, if I may. Any staffing updates for your need for an assistant or a
Sure. So,
Joanne replacement?
yeah, so we ended up, we've been working on some stuff internally and some kind of larger scheme things for the department as well. But we've redone Joanne's description a little bit to make it something that Joanne had kind of moved into that position over time and kind of trained through. So we changed it back a bit and had to send a revised description into the union for its kind of sign off and approval. And that has happened. So hopefully we'll be in the newspaper in the next week or so, and we'll be underway for hiring. It'd be really nice. Trust me, no one more than me wants to replace Joanne.
Well, and also, we're never going to replace Joanne, but there will be a new person.
So, well, notice I had to change the job description to replace Joanne because she's so impossible to replace that, you know, you have to look at more people. So, but we did, I will say we did actually hire just recently. We had started the process before Joanne left, so it's not a secret, but we have recently hired our coastal resources technician. So the person that's going to come in and help out and do some added hands for monitoring some of these areas for us for projects and compliance, and just be kind of a data gatherer to get back to primarily myself or back to Vince for us to take a look at. And that person starts for us in a little less than 2 weeks. So once we get there and paperwork's done, we'll get her in front of you guys to meet you guys at some point.
So,
Ian,
it's just,
yep.
thank you, Madam Chair. So will her brief be enforcement?
It's not directly enforcement, Ian. There's some issues with that. So the way that the state act reads and our local bylaw reads. So essentially what she's going to be empowered to do is to go out and collect information for us and provide that back to us. She will have the ability to, tell people to pause work until one of us can either get out there to formally issue a cease and desist if necessary. But one of the things we're hoping to have her do just per se is when we know a nourishment event's going to happen, especially on some of the larger projects, like the one in Pocomo or the one, obviously for Wisconsin Bluff or some of the other ones, is to have them be able to be present when that activity is going on and to be able to obviously recognize, hey, that doesn't look like it's the correct material. Could you please stop until Jeff can come out and review it? And if whoever you need to call to come and do that can do that, and they'll be empowered to be able to do that. So I guess the kind of the crux of it is if someone starts to see, bricks or material that looks totally out of whack, they will have the ability to do that. And once we get around, I think we're going to go ahead and let anyone who's doing that work also know that if our inspector is out there, our person is out there, if they ask you to pause, that it is expected to pause, or I'll be coming or we'll send our actual enforcement officer out as well. And that's not an ideal situation to start that process with, is to be in an adversarial position. So we're trying to enable to be successful and to make sure that she also gets comfortable with being able to see and recognize all those things and be in a spot where they've learned what to look for and what not to look for. But that also takes some time to do. So, but it'll be nice to get an extra set of eyes for when those things are going on. Obviously, if it's something that's really big or something that's a little bit more diverse in scope or complicated, that's something that, we would probably try to accompany from our office with. But I think just for day-to-day observation on things, it'll be incredibly helpful for us.
It sounds great. So, thank you.
But our real goal with it too is to also be able to say that we're laying eyes on all of our erosion structures around the island, at least monthly at a minimum, and some of the more substantial ones more than that. Because right now that can be a challenge to do. So it'd be nice to be able to do it and photograph it and be able to kind of keep track of it and make sure we're capturing any, subtleties that are going on for any issues.
Right.
It's going to be a lot of windshield and walking time. So I'm a little jealous.
Any other commissioners' comments? All right, so Jeff, do you have any administrator staff reports? Oh, you're muted.
Before we head into our executive session, just be sure that you note that we're going to be adjourning from executive session and we're going to conclude the public meeting portion. But I will also need, I have to start that meeting, so it may take a second to get in, so please don't panic.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
So that'll give me time to run to the restroom and get back.
Yeah, if everyone wants to if we want to reconvene that at 8 and give everyone a 5-minute break, I can have it started by then for sure. If everyone else needs.
Okay. Do we need to declare at the end of this regular meeting that we're not planning to reconvene a regular meeting?
Yeah, so somebody needs to make a motion to adjourn the regular meeting in order to enter into executive session for the purpose outlined in our agenda, with the intention not to come back into a public meeting.
That isn't adjourning. All you're really doing is entering into executive session, because you've already declared you're not returning to open session.
Okay, so then we would just
So
adjourn.
yeah, just go straight into that great big long motion to go into blah 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 blah.
Okay, so would somebody like to make a motion then to go into executive session for the purpose outlined on the agenda with the intention not to come back into an open public session.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Okay, so I will see you all in executive session.
Okay.
Are we starting at 8?
8 o'clock
Yeah.
sharp.
All right, I'll start it now, and if people hop in, they hop in. But we won't
Okay.
get going.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, thanks.